Chapter 6. The character of the country through which we passed for the last 2 or 3 days was cheerless in comparison with that to which we had been accustomed. In general, it was more level, the timber being more abundant on the skirts of the stream, with little or none at all in the distance. Whatever bluffs appeared upon the margin we descried indications of coal, and saw one extensive bed of a thick bituminous nature, which very much discolored the water for some 100 yards below it. The current is more gentle than hitherto, the water clearer, and the rocky points and shoals fewer, although such as we had to pass were as difficult as ever. We had rain incessantly, which rendered the banks so slippery that the men who had the towing lines could scarcely walk. The air, too, was disagreeably chilly, and upon ascending some low hills near the river, we observed no small quantity of snow lying in the clefts and ridges. In the extreme distance on our right, we had perceived several Indian encampments which had the appearance of being temporary, and had been only lately abandoned. This region gives no indication of any permanent settlement, but appears to be a favorite hunting ground with the tribes in the vicinity, a fact rendered evident by the frequent traces of the hunt, which we came across in every direction. The Minnetarees of the Missouri, it is well known, extend their exertions in pursuit of game as high as Great Fork, on the south side, where the Assiniboines go up still far higher. Miss Squash informed us that between our present encampment and the Rocky Mountains we should meet with no lodges except those of the Minnetarees that reside on the lower side of the or south side of the Saskatchewan. The game had been exceedingly abundant and in great variety: elk, buffalo, bighorn, mule deer, bears, foxes, beaver, etc., etc., with wildfowl innumerable. Fish was also plentiful. The width of the stream varied considerably, from 250 yards to pass where the current rushed between bluffs not more than 100 feet apart. The faces of these bluffs generally was composed of a light yellowish freestone intermingled with burnt earth, pumice stone, and mineral salts. At one point, the aspect of the country underwent a remarkable change. The hills retiring on both sides to a great distance from the river, which was thickly interspersed with small and beautiful islands covered with cottonwood. The low grounds appeared to be very fertile, those on the north wide and low, and opening to 3 extensive valleys. Here seemed to be the extreme northern termination of the range of mountains through which the Missouri had been passing for so long a time, and which are called the Black Hills, or Pahasapa, by the savages. The change from the mountainous region to the low level was indicated by the atmosphere, which now became dry and pure. So much indeed that we perceived its effects upon our seams of our boats and our few mathematical instruments. As we made immediate approach to the forks, it came on to rain hard, and the obstructions of the river were harassing in the extreme. The banks in some places were so slippery and the clay so soft and stiff that the men were obliged to go barefooted, as they could not keep on their moccasins. The shore was were full of pools and of stagnant water through which we were obliged to wade, sometimes up to our armpits. Then again we had to scramble over enormous shoals of sharp-pointed flints, which appeared to be the wreck of cliffs that had fallen down en masse. Occasionally we came to a precipitous gorge or gully, which it would put us to the greatest labor to pass, and in attempting to push by one of these, the rope of the large boat, being old and much worn, gave way and permitted her to be swung around by the current boat upon a ledge of rock in the middle of the stream, where the water was so deep that we could only work in getting her off by the aid of the rope, and were full 6 hours in effecting it. At one period we arrived at the high wall of black rock on the south, towering above ordinary hills for about a quarter of a mile along the stream, after which there was an open plain, and about 3 miles beyond this again, another wall of light color on the same side, 4,200 feet high, and then another plain or valley, and then still another wall of most singular appearance arises on the north, soaring in height probably about 250 feet, and being in thickness about 12, with a very regular artificial character. These cliffs present indeed the most extraordinary aspect, rising perpendicularly from the water. The last mentioned are composed of a very white, soft sandstone, which readily receives the impression of the water. In the upper portion of them appears a sort of frieze or cornice, formed by the intervention of several thin horizontal strata of a white freestone, hard and unaffected by the rains. Above them is a dark, rich soil sloping gradually back from the water to the extent of a mile or thereabouts, when the other hills spring up 50 feet abruptly to the height of full 500 feet or more. The face of these remarkable cliffs, as might be supposed, is checkered with a variety of lines formed by the trickling of rains upon the soft material, so that a fertile fancy might easily imagine them to be gigantic monuments reared by human art, and carved over with hieroglyphical devices. Sometimes there are complete niches, like those we see for statues in common temples, formed by the dropping out bodily of large fragments of the sandstone, and there are several points where staircases and long corridors appear. Accidental fractures in the freestone cornice happen to let the rain trickle down uniformly upon the softer material below. We passed these singular bluffs in this bright moonlight, and their effect upon my imagination I shall never forget. They had all the air of the enchanted structures, such as I have dreamed of, and the twittering of myriads of martins which have built their nests in the holes that everywhere perforate the mass aided this conception not a little. Besides the main walls, there are at intervals inferior ones of about from 20 to 100 feet high, and from 1 to 12 or 15 feet thick, perfectly regular in shape and perpendicular. These are formed of a succession of large black-looking stones, apparently made of loam, sand, and quartz, and absolutely symmetrical in figure, although of various sizes. They're usually square, but sometimes oblong, so always parallelepipedal, and are lying one above the other and exactly with as perfect regularity as if placed there by some mortal mason, each upper stone covering and securing the point of junction between the two lower ones, just as bricks are laid in a wall. Sometimes these singular erections run in parallel lines, as many as 4 abreast. Sometimes they leave the river and go back until lost amid the hills. Sometimes they cross each other at right angles, seeming to enclose large artificial gardens, vegetation within which is often of a character to preserve the illusion. Where the walls are thinnest, the bricks are less in size and the converse. We regarded the scenery presented to our view at this portion as altogether the most surprising, if not the most beautiful, which we had yet seen. It left upon my own mind an impression of novelty, of a singularity which can never be effaced. Shortly before reaching the fork, we came to a pretty large island on the north side. Northern side. 1 mile and a quarter from which is a low ground on the south, very thickly covered with fine timber. After this, there were several small islands, at which each of these we touched for a few minutes as we passed. Then we came to a very black-looking bluff on the north, and then to 2 other small islands, about which we observed nothing remarkable. Going about a few miles farther, we reached a tolerably large island situated near the point of a steep promontory, afterwards passing 2 others smaller. All these islands are well timbered. It was night on the 13th of May that we were shown by Miss Squash the mouth of the large river, which is in these settlements goes by the name Yellowstone, but by the Indians is called the Amatieza. Editor's footnote. There appears to be some discrepancy here which we have not thought yet worthwhile to alter, as after all Mr. Rodman may not be in the wrong.